Welcome to Front Office Pros. I'm Steve and this is Joe. Today we're going to be talking about three players that we're telling you to buy now for the rest of the season and possibly beyond, especially for those of you who play in Dynasty as of week 10. And when we talk about buy now, we're talking about we are buying their production moving forward. So let's talk about our first player, Joe. Pretty dynamic performance. Yesterday, wide receiver Christian Watson of the Green Bay Packers. He had 8 targets for 4 catches for 107 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, 3 touchdowns is just absolutely phenomenal, and you can't expect that week in, week out. But the fact that, Dobbs was out yesterday, as well as he'll be out for a few more weeks here, and it seems like Rodgers is putting a little trust in Christian Watson, especially those deep shots down the field. So, I mean, he's definitely a high ceiling player at this point, like you mentioned. The 8 targets, but the 107 yards, not that many receptions either for those. So, I mean, those are big plays down the field and was able to get them for touchdowns as well. So, was definitely impressive, and Rodgers is believing him. I mean, he's definitely a good ceiling play for you, probably for the future, especially while Dobbs is out.
Yeah, he's the ultimate ceiling play. And for redraft leagues right now, within the fantasy football community, he's probably the waiver wire darling that most people are talking about. He was probably available in your leagues to go get. If you have Fab, you might want to consider putting a decent amount. In dynasty leagues like ours, he was drafted, I'd say, higher than what you and I expected. And he has really been a dud so far this season. I think it was really encouraging to see him actually make a long, touchdown grab, because Rodgers has given him not a ton of opportunities, but some opportunities with the long ball, and he was dropping them. So now that he finally kind of put it all together this week and he had the big performance that he did, I think that trust now, I mean, Rodgers has to trust him at this point. I mean, Cobb's out. You said Dobbs is out. So it's not like he has too many reliable options as it is. But this is a huge confidence builder for Watson, and honestly, probably for a lot of you in Dynasty. I mean, I would have been thinking that was a bust if I made that pick. Obviously, it's too early. It's not even we're just over the halfway point in the season. You can't just, bail on him this soon. It's too early. But you were definitely having some concerns, I feel like, until now.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, I mean, definitely a confidence booster. I mean, ever since that week 1 play, Rodgers had that perfect pass for the deep ball, and Watson dropped that 75-yarder for a touchdown. And really, once that happened, like, Rodgers kind of just wrote him off and was like, I can't really trust this guy. One thing that'll be interesting to watch, I think Cobb's probably coming back sooner than later here, so that'll be interesting to see how Watson's used. But definitely, we'll see him just get those, fly routes and get opportunities for the deep ball for sure.
He's the ultimate ceiling play, and it's worth adding him on your roster, or it's worth now considering starting him. Most likely, unless you're in a deep league, you weren't starting him to begin with. Now he is an option moving forward as the ultimate ceiling play if you're chasing the points. I don't, like you said, don't expect this week in, week out, but now it's at least a consideration you're having, where before it would have been like the ultimate dart throw.
Yeah, and as we were talking, I mean, 40% of the target share on that offense, and Rodgers didn't pass that often either. So that was really impressive. And as a Lazard owner, he's definitely making me a little more concerned because Lazard was almost an afterthought yesterday.
Yeah, so our next player is wide receiver Rondale Moore. Against the Rams, he had 13 targets and with 9 catches for 94 yards.
Yeah, he was really productive yesterday, especially with the backup Cole McCoy. He seemed to really like him and target him heavily. But even when Kyler was in there, we've seen back-to-back weeks with Kyler as well, where he was getting, I believe he gotten 10 targets the last 2 weeks with Kyler even. So, the scene within the last few weeks, his utilization is peaking up. and he's getting the yards and getting those opportunities that everyone was thinking that he would before the season. In the preseason, everyone was like, "Oh, watch out for Rondale Moore this year. They're going to use him a lot more and not just throw it behind the line of scrimmage to him." We had kind of been waiting to see this all year long, but within the last few weeks, we definitely have seen that shift, and he's getting more utilized in this Cardinals offense.
Yeah, against the Seattle Seahawks, he had 10 targets. Against the Vikings, he had 8 targets. And then yesterday, he had 13 targets. But you're looking at an average of over 25% target share over these past 3 weeks if you take all those combined. So, and he's getting over 90% snap count percentage as well. We had hoped that he would kind of take over the Christian Kirk role in this offense. And he didn't start off as strong because he was injured. So it took him a little while to get back healthy. And now that he's getting involved in the offense, it's a very encouraging sign. I think we have to buy him moving forward. It'll be interesting to see what it will look like with, and I don't know if we're going to see it because I don't know if Marquise Hollywood Brown is actually even going to come back this year. But what does the offense look like with Hollywood Brown, Hopkins, and Rondale Moore? I don't think Murray can support all three. Unless, Ertz is going to be out for a while. So, maybe Trey McBride comes in and he emerges. Maybe he doesn't. But I think at least for the short term and possibly the long term, you got to feel happy about Rondale Moore. I know I had my doubts because of his size. I thought he was going to be more of a gadget guy. They're starting to use him more as a true receiver, and it's definitely promising.
Yeah, absolutely. As far as I definitely agree with you that Murray can't support the 3 receivers. I just don't trust him that much in order to support those guys. But even if Hollywood Brown does come back, I'm not sure that how much it'll affect Rondale Moore. I think he's still going to be one of the focal points in the offense, and then maybe just Hollywood Brown comes in and kind of gets those deep threats and gets a few shots per game, perhaps.
All right, and our third player we're going to be talking about is tight end T.J. Hockenson. Now, Joe and I in a previous video were a little leery as to how involved he'd get. But over the past 2 weeks, he's been pretty involved. And against Buffalo, he had 10 targets for 7 catches for 45 yards.
Yeah, he's definitely been impressive, Steve. I mean, we both knew that Hockenson was a very talented tight end, but for whatever reason, Detroit didn't use him. Wasn't sure how much, Minnesota was going to target the tight end position because Irv Smith wasn't really that heavily involved in this offense. But, it was interesting because even Osborne saw some more plays against the Bills yesterday, but it really seems like Thielen could be the guy kind of taking the back seat here for Hockenson coming more involved. I mean, in just a 2-week sample, 10 targets yesterday against the Bills. Then he was 9 targets the week before, caught all 9 passes for 70 yards. And then he's getting involved in the red zone as well. That is yet to turn into a touchdown for him as for the Vikings. But if he does do that, I mean, he's looking at a, double-digit point week in fantasy.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've talked about how the tight end position group in general has been bananas. So it's hard to really have a tight end that you can really rely and depend on. It almost feels like a yo-yo game. One day you got one tight end who is a reliable tight end, and all of a sudden they fall off the face of the earth. Then they come back. You've probably been playing a game of musical chairs, I would think, it was in tight end, unless you have Kelsey or Mark Andrews. But what I would say about Hockenson is, like you said, watching that game, he was targeted heavily, and you don't see those red zone targets usually show up in the box scores. But he was targeted pretty heavily in the red zone. I was surprised as to how early and often he's been involved. Even they were talking about how it took Kirk Cousins a decent bit to learn the offense, but as far as Hockenson, he's just getting right into it. He's a young tight end, and he was a former first-round pick. He used to just be sparingly used with the Lions. We'd saw like a highlight game where he went absolutely off, and then he would disappear. I feel that T.J. Hockenson is making himself into a tight end 1. I think the Vikings are gonna re-sign him. Obviously he had the 5th-year option accepted. So he'll be there for a little bit, but I expect him to sign there long term, and we'll see what happens with Kirk Cousins and them in the future. But if this offense stays as it is, Hockenson's going to get more and more involved, and for a tight end to get 9 to 10 targets a game, that's huge.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely been way more opportunities than I thought. And like you mentioned, if this does keep up, he will be a tight end one, especially, like you said, with the loss of Zach Ertz for a decent bit here. And then, even a guy like Gerald Everett, who people have been kind of relying on, he's been kind of shaky here of late. So yeah, Hawkinson's looking like a great option moving forward at the tight end position.
If I had him, I don't see why I wouldn't start him every week at this point. I mean, you might have other options that maybe you have a consideration to start someone else, but I feel pretty confident moving forward with him as my tight end.
Yeah, I agree. I'd be confident to play him week in and week out as well.
That was 3 players that we're telling you that you should buy now as far as their production goes for the rest of the season and possibly beyond. We're a new channel. We try to create several videos on a weekly basis. So we encourage you to like this video, hit the subscribe button for this channel, and go ahead and hit the notification bell and leave some comments. Do you agree with Joe and I about the players that we're telling you that you should buy now? Or do you have some other players that you want to know our opinion as to whether or not we would buy them? Go ahead and leave a comment. And thanks again for watching. And until next time.